Welcome to Out of the Fold. This episode is about Angela. Angela left the Jehovah's Witnesses in early 2018, and she's the one who introduced me to the work of Steve Hassan, the cult expert who developed the BITE model for identifying when mind control is being utilized. Angela was kind enough to be prepared with direct excerpts from his book ahead of time, and I encourage everyone to research his work. No religious organizations, companies, or individuals were contacted for comment about any of the content of this episode. The views expressed are strictly those of the ones expressing them. Our conversation began on a Sunday afternoon.
I was a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses organization for 10 years, and growing up, I grew up in a non-Jehovah's Witness Christian household. One parent was religious, the other parent wasn't, and all of my other family were all part of the organization. So I kind of knew about it, but I never became a member until I was older. I had, like many Jehovah's Witnesses, I had gone through some difficult life trauma, and at the time, I felt like, they had answers to a lot of questions, and it made sense. But it wasn't until many years later that I started to see the truth about the organization.
Okay, and I'm sorry, there was a little bit of noise at the very beginning. What did you say you were? I think you also mentioned when we spoke through Reddit, you said you were raised Baptist. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
Okay. So did you leave directly from being a Baptist to Jehovah's Witness, or did you leave,
Yes.
Baptist Christianity earlier, and then, you kind of were wandering for a little bit and then find Jehovah's Witnesses?
I went straight from being a Baptist to being a Jehovah's Witness. I wasn't particularly devout at the time, but I kind of saw the hypocrisy in the church, and that really turned me off. And so, I had a few years where I didn't really go to church or anything. I wasn't particularly religious. But then I joined the organization because my mom and my brother were actually studying with Jehovah's Witnesses at the time. I had studied as well at different times in my life, growing up, like with my grandmother, who's Jehovah's Witness, or with others when I was younger. So I kind of knew some things about it, but really they present to you, the reality are two very different things.
So let's start with that a little bit. You said that your mother and brother were studying to become Jehovah's Witnesses. Were they all part of the the Baptist community as well when you were growing up?
No, my mom was not religious at all. My brother would go to church sometimes, but he wasn't particularly religious, but actually he was in high school at the time, and he just really wanted to kind of get the answer to some of life's questions, and he wanted to just learn more about the religion. And so he started studying, and my father only agreed, my father who's to this day very much a Baptist, my father only agreed to allowing him to study if my mom was there to see what it is that he was being taught. And so then she wound up studying as well. But prior to that, all of my aunts and uncle and almost all of my cousins, they were all and still are very much part of this organization. So we were kind of like the pagan holdout, and here we are.
So if you were raised Baptist, how did that work with it sounds like at least half of your family, or at least half of your immediate family, was not actually religious. So, I mean, was that just something that you did on your own, or was it like your father's side of the family that wanted you to be raised that way?
I actually, when I was around 13, I had like an intense study of the Bible. I would compare the different translations, so the Baptist one and the New World Translation that Witnesses use.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to get answers to different things that I had been wondering about. And when I was 16, I got baptized as a Baptist. But yeah, I became kind of disenchanted once I got older and saw the hypocrisy with being a Baptist as well. So kind of left that and then became a witness later.
Gotcha. So what was it about the Jehovah's Witnesses and that specific translation or interpretation of the Bible that felt right to you?
I just really liked that they always had an answer to your questions. When I had gone to church and I had to like make an appointment with the pastor, this was several years prior, maybe when I was around 18, and about 22 is when I became a witness. So I had seen hypocrisy, and so I thought that the Jehovah's Witnesses didn't have that kind of hypocrisy. They really, it appeared that they tried to live their lives by the Bible. And so I really liked that. And I just really liked that everything could be traced back to the Bible. So that it was never just like, hey, just do this. It was, well, the Bible says this, and that's the conclusion. So it seemed very logical and direct at the time.
And you didn't experience that with Baptist Christians? You didn't think that they were able to trace a lot of what they taught back to the Bible?
Yeah, there was a lot of things with Baptist Christians that just never made sense. I really tried to understand the Trinity at the time, and I put in a lot of effort, and it just never made sense to me. And just seeing, how difficult it was to kind of even get a clear answer that did make sense, it was really a turn-off. Yeah.
So you said that you were with the Jehovah's Witnesses for about 10 years, though?
Yes.
So at what point did you start to wonder about it?
Well, actually, soon after getting baptized, I was going in service, and this is, now over a decade ago, but I still remember to this day, there was a man at the door who was kind of going back and forth and debating us about our beliefs, and I didn't really know the history of the organization. That wasn't something that was taught to people who were coming into the group. So he, said, I'm a person of color. So he said, well, did you know that there was a time when you guys wouldn't have even been able to be Jehovah's Witnesses? And I was just like, what? And so he kind of said he had all these older publications and things. And yeah, so we had knocked on his door, and he was explaining to us, like, you don't even know the history of your organization. And, there was a time when Black people couldn't even be part of it. And, here you guys are. And we're just like, oh, that's not true. Not knowing, that everything he was saying was valid.
Huh.
And so, yeah, it was quite interesting. But I had a similar experience to your other guest, where there was definitely racial unity was and still is very much promoted. And it appeared that was, true. They really make a point of saying how much they stand out, and that unity is the proof that this is God's organization. And I brought that hook, line, and sinker because growing up, I had family who had gone to Bethel, family who were missionaries. I mean, my entire family is extremely indoctrinated, and they're not just in it, they're like attempting to be all-stars. So almost all of the adults in my family who are Jehovah's Witnesses are pioneers.
Right.
So, I had seen some of the experiences that they related of going to another country and how welcoming the other witnesses were, and this unity. So to me, hearing that growing up as an adult, that stood out in my mind as something that was very different, from the Southern Black Baptist Church, where there was like two white people, everyone's Black. Here it's like, oh wow, everyone, can be totally accepted as one, and it was just awesome.
Yeah.
Or at least the idea was awesome. But in reality, a lot of congregations, they're made up of whoever lives in the area. So they tend to be racially not as diverse as I had expected. But definitely it was very welcoming and positive. They do a lot of the love bombing that cults do. So yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned, actually, again, when we spoke through Reddit, you said that it fits, you said the I don't know if it would actually just be said the BITE model, but the BITE model of what a cult is. I mean, it sounds like you've really done some research and, broken it down as to what the Jehovah's Witnesses do.
Yes. So initially I've always felt like there was quite a bit of control, but of course, I thought it was justified. But since waking up from the indoctrination, I just kind of started to see behind the smoke and mirrors, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a very proactive kind of person. So I got this book after hearing about it on Reddit, and it has been tremendously helpful for helping me to process what I came out of. And it absolutely fits all of the BITE model to a T. In fact, I think if people who are current Jehovah's Witnesses were to really look at what the BITE model says, they would see that they're in a cult. For me, that was definitely the case.
I'm going to do some research on that myself, but could you talk about that a little bit? Could you just sort of summarize what you've learned? And again, I'm not expecting you to know all of the definitional points of the BITE model, but from what you remember, I mean, what did you learn and how does it fit?
Yes. So actually, I have the book here.
Okay. Perfect.
So the B is for behavior control. So they control what kind of food you eat, how much sleep you get, what jobs and rituals, what kind of clothes you can wear. And that's very much true because Jehovah's Witnesses are regularly told about what kind of clothing is acceptable. They constantly will word it in a way where it's not as direct. So they don't say, sisters, don't wear short skirts, or brothers, well, they do tell brothers not to wear tight pants. People who are in the Ex-Jehovah community, we've had quite a bit of fun laughing at Toni Morris and how intense his hatred of tight pants is. Mm-hmm. But that just goes to show you that, if you're telling people how tight their pants can be, and, they even have a poster in all the Kingdom Halls still with a picture of people dressed to go to Bethel because they wanted to make sure that people knew how they were supposed to look. So they definitely control behavior, even matters between married couples in their sex lives. There are articles talking about what is appropriate and not appropriate. Mm-hmm. I know for me, I went through a judicial situation. I was engaged at the time to a fellow Jehovah's Witness. We did not have sex, but there were things that, were deemed inappropriate that happened between us. And I felt guilty. We told the elders, and they asked me if I had an orgasm. They asked me how many times this had. It was extremely graphic, and I know that if there was a witness who was listening right now, they'd think it's just those elders. I got to tell you, if you look into the Ex-JW community, we keep hearing the same story over and over. This is not something that is unique.
Right.
But yeah, they definitely control the behavior. Information control is huge. Actually, they have a fairly recent article that came out about trusting the media. And so witnesses are encouraged to do lots of Bible research in Jehovah's Witness publications. They're not encouraged to do outside research. Literally every witness that I've spoken to about any information I found, their first question is not, what do you mean? I'm concerned about the child abuse. Their first question is, how did you find that? So their information is controlled. Thought control is also a thing. To quote Steve Hassan, in totalistic cults, the ideology is internalized as the truth, the only map of reality. And that is totally, they call their religion the truth, and, basically imply that everything else is a lie. And emotional control. Emotional control has been huge. There are an alarming amount of Jehovah's Witnesses suffering with depression and anxiety. And while that's, you can say that's true of the country in general, I definitely believe that this religion makes it much worse, and for some people even causes it. I actually have a family member who is about 29, and it wasn't until this past year that she had like crippling depression. Now, granted, I do have a degree in psychology, but I'm not saying I'm an expert. That's not the field I currently work in. So granted, you could say, maybe it just had an onset now, but I seriously believe that it's largely due to the decisions and choices that they've made to put this organization first. So there's constantly people feeling guilty all of the time. The amount of guilt that they put on people it's very disturbing.
So let's go through this again. So behavior control, that would be when someone, like you said, when they want to control, just for example, your sex life. So the way that you the way that you have sex and things like that. So that's one thing. Information control, basically, if it doesn't come from the Jehovah's Witnesses, then it's incorrect. Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay. Thought control being that. I guess that one can be kind of tougher to define. Like, how do you control somebody's thoughts? But would it be like if you think that maybe like if you question the Jehovah's Witnesses, then you're committing a sin? Is it that sort of thing? Yes,
absolutely. If like I could never have such an open conversation with a current Jehovah's Witness. They're not even allowed to allow. Like, so for example, my mom, who I'm extremely close to. Our relationship is now strained, and a lot of it is because she can't allow the thought that, hey, I'm a rational, reasonable person. If I dedicated my life to this and I was totally in, don't you think I must have a good reason to walk away? Mm-hmm. For her, I have said that to her repeatedly, and she refuses to believe that. She wants to believe, maybe I just drifted away. I'm going through some difficult things, or, these other things that have happened, and it's like she refuses to see what I'm actually telling her.
Right.
Because in order for her to do that, she has to think, hey, maybe this is not true, and that's really dangerous for them.
Gotcha. Like it's considered apostate to do that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And then emotional control, making people feel guilty for considering or doing any of those BIT things.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did you learn? Sorry, go ahead.
Where did I learn about the fight model?
Yeah. Let's do that. Where did you learn about this?
Actually, through the Ex-JW community. It has literally saved my life. When I first started to uncover some of the glaring problems with this organization, namely like the child abuse.
Yeah.
I was suicidal because I could not reconcile this with what I had believed. But then on top of that, I couldn't tell anyone. I made the mistake of trying to talk to a friend. I just said, I've been through a really rough year. I think I might celebrate my birthday. And we've never talked again. I actually have no friends from the organization at this point. I mentioned some concerns to two other friends who slowly drifted away. So it has been extremely difficult because in addition to having your world crumble, you can't tell anyone and you're all by yourself. So the Ex-JW community is where I learned about the bite model and even how to leave the cult. There's different methods of leaving, which is, clearly it's a cult if you have to plan your escape.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense that somebody would become depressed and even potentially have thoughts of suicide. If you are doing you are having apostate thoughts and you're feeling guilty about doing so, and there's nobody that you can talk to about that because that will be considered wrong on their part for doing so.
Yeah. And Stephen Hassan says the most powerful technique for emotional control is phobia indoctrination. Members will have a panic reaction at the thought of leaving the group. They are told that if they leave, they will be lost and defenseless in the face of dark horrors. They'll go insane, be killed, become drug addicts, or commit suicide. Such tales are repeated often, both in lectures and in hushed tones through informal gossip. That is absolutely spot on. And the thing is that if someone is disfellowshipped or formally kicked out of the group, no one can talk to them after that. So we only have gossip or rumor or assumptions to go on. So if someone, we don't really know what's happening. So it kind of feeds into and gives validity to that fear. Oh, if you leave, you're going to end up like this person.
Yeah. So were you just reading that directly from the book, by the way? That
Yeah.
that definition?
Page 104, yeah. Gotcha.
So, and you mentioned very briefly about the child abuse scandal. I honestly, like, this is only something that I've learned about in the last couple of months, but is it similar to what happened and what's been going on with the Catholic Church?
Yes, it's very similar. And in 2016, the Australian Royal Commission was assembled, and they look into institutional responses of child abuse. Mm-hmm. So they looked at Jehovah's Witnesses as well as many other religious and secular organizations. And ironically, if you ask a current Jehovah's Witness about the Australian Royal Commission, I'd bet you $1 million that they have no idea what you're talking about. This is, the organization was very, very open with their criticisms of the Catholic Church when all of that was in the media. But now there's nothing in their publications about their own organization. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. So it sounds like it's not just like a couple of bastards that are molesting kids. I mean, it's an actual institution of the Jehovah's Witnesses that, are they trying to cover it up? Like, is it that same sort of thing?
Yes. So there were a few issues with that. So in the Australian Royal Commission, what really woke me up was actually when Jeffrey Jackson, who's one of the governing body members, he was asked if the governing body is God's spokesperson, which any witness would say yes. It's in multiple publications. And his response was, it would be presumptuous to say that we are the only spokesperson God is using today. I literally, I just gasped out loud. I almost fell off of my chair because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But as far as the child abuse, he did testify, but other governing body members were asked to testify in other cases and refused to. There's been cases in Australia, Canada, as well as the United States. And even late in 2018, there was a multi-million-dollar award given to a case in Montana. So it's something that has been going on. And Barbara Anderson actually was on the news, I think in 2017. She was on the news because she was serving in Bethel for a very long time, and she came across all of these records of people who were accused of child molestation. And so what the Watchtower does is, if someone is accused, they have to call Bethel first, and then they'll let them know if their state requires them to report it to police.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so for me, that was absurd because I work in a profession where I am a mandated reporter. So if I suspect any type of child abuse, I don't get to decide. I have to call.
Sure.
So it was just to me that this organization that says they're God's one true organization, they have, less stringent expectations than a state. It just didn't make sense. So with the child abuse, that is their policy, is that they call them and make that decision. But then also they have what is known as the two-witness rule. So if a child comes and says that they were abused by someone, there has to be another witness to the crime in order for it to be corroborated. So they'll go and ask the accused person, hey, did you do this? The person says no. That's it. There's no judicial case, within the organization, and there's no automatic, we're going to call the police and let them figure it out. So, and they have upheld that. They even had criticism and a protest about it. People were protesting outside of Bethel, and not long after that, at their morning worship, they said, we will never change the two-witness rule. So for me, seeing this morning worship on the broadcasting channel and just saying, oh, okay, that makes sense. I didn't have any context. I didn't know about the protests. I didn't know that all of these other things were happening. So I just took it as, okay, there's a 2-witness rule. It says it's in the Bible. We're not going to change it. That makes sense. But now that I have all of that context, it's very, very disturbing.
Okay, so I went to an evangelical Lutheran high school. I don't want to claim that I'm like a scholar on the Bible, but I don't remember that in the Bible about there needing to be 2 witnesses of a of that for it to be valid. Now, that being said, I mean, even if it does say it somewhere, in Christianity, a lot of people have moved past those sorts of things. Like, I've talked about this a few times. It's like we don't, I don't identify as a Christian anymore, but even if I did, it's like we don't do the things that like Moses instructed us to do with everything. Like we don't stone adulterers anymore. So it's like, where is the basis for this? Like, do you remember, and I'm not expecting you to like remember the exact book and verse of this, but like that doesn't sound scriptural. It sounds like something that they either interpreted or something that they made up just for this specific denomination.
So it's, I believe, taken from Leviticus, and they really talk about this in depth in the Australian Royal Commission. And the circumstances were that if a woman was raped, she had to call out and, kind of determining that. And then like a following verse to that was talking about the 2-witness rule if someone's accused of something. And so they feel that that's something that should be upheld because, again, in Matthew somewhere, it comes up again that there should be 2 witnesses. So they feel like it's in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and so it's something that we have to stick to. In reality, they don't want the organization to look bad because there were in Australia about 1,000 cases of suspected child abuse that they never reported to police. And in Australia, they're legally required to do so. So, yeah, and I totally agree. Like, I feel like there's nothing that anyone could say to justify not protecting children. Like it just doesn't make sense. But I mean, if you look at their blood policy, they're more concerned with the doctrine than people's lives. So they say that the Bible says not to take blood, so you should die instead of taking the blood. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Right. And I want to talk about that in just a second, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, dude, like I guess maybe like I'm not speaking from the perspective of being a Jehovah's Witness or from ever having been a Jehovah's Witness, but the idea that you would be more interested in protecting your organization than protecting kids doesn't sound Christ-like. Like it doesn't sound, and of course, like people like to talk about Jesus as though like he was this incredibly peaceful person the entire time that he was alive, and that's not totally correct either. But the big thing that he wanted to take away was that that I think he was trying to get people to believe in was loving one another, and that this idea to me is very odd because, I mean, if you want your organization to look good, maybe you shouldn't abuse kids to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And their policy is that if someone is in that situation where they have 2 witnesses, then they'll make sure that they're never in a position of oversight. So they can never be an elder. They'll never be the person to take out the group for field service. They'll keep them from being alone with children. But federal court cases have shown that has not always been done. And not only that, but, I just feel like there's a moral obligation. If I'm going to a Kingdom Hall and allegedly, they call each other their friends, that's how they refer to each other. How can you be my Christian brother or sister? How can you be my friend? And I have kids, and my kids hang out with your kids, and that brother so-and-so is a child molester. How could you not tell me? Right. Even if, people might say that there's the anonymity issue, and, they've tried to use the clergy protection in some of these cases where they say that as clergy they have to keep it confidential. But even in that situation, there could simply be a local needs talk where you just address the whole congregation and make it very clear people need to be extra careful. I feel like there are ways where you can even, not tell everyone, hey, it's this guy, but still let people know there's a danger in our midst. We need to be careful. And what really makes that infuriating is that not only do they not do that, but they will do that when they do a marking talk. So let's say that someone does something that is not a disfellowshipping offense, but it's publicly known that they did something wrong. I'll use my own example. When I had to call off my wedding, very close to the wedding, that's a whole other topic, but basically he turned out to be crazy. I had to call off my wedding. They gave a marking talk. They gave a talk about keeping your commitment. And the elder even called me and said, hey, are you going to come to this meeting? I want you to hear this talk. And I said, oh, what is it about? And when he told me, I made a decision not to go because everyone in the room would know that it was about me and my fiance. My fiance did go, and he had his head down and felt horrible the whole meeting, I heard, but I didn't go. So my point is, you're willing to do that for that issue, but you won't do that when a child is abused. That's nuts.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, when you get enough people that believe something, or even if like you just have, let's say there's like a room of people, like let's say there's a room that can hold 20,000 people. I mean, you want to think that nobody in that room is gonna like, just in general say commit a crime. Let's just put it really general. You want to say that nobody in that room is going to commit a crime, but if you get a room of 20,000 people, there's a chance that somebody in there is going to commit a crime or has committed a crime. So it's like, if you use that same statistic and apply it to the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's like if they wanted to look good, they could just say this doesn't represent the Jehovah's Witnesses, and we have turned this person who has done this thing into crime, into the authorities, and just be done with it, and that's all there is to it. Jehovah's Witnesses image is saved. This is just a rogue person whose actions they don't agree with, even if it happens multiple times. Keep shunning them and saying this is not what we stand for, but they're not doing that. Is what I'm getting from this. They sort of have it institutionalized that maybe they say they don't agree with it, but when it happens, they instead of actually trying to solve the problem and stop the crime from happening in the future, they just keep brushing it under the rug and hiding the fact that it happened.
Yeah, and they seem to have this view that child molestation is a spiritual issue. And they have publicly said in their more updated policy, which is on their website, that it is a crime. But they, in different cases, it has been shown that they believe that people can change. And I mean, statistics show that. And I even had a conversation. I'm laughing because it's so crazy, not because it's funny. I had a conversation with my mom about this exact topic, and she said, well, people can change. The Bible shows that, anyone can change. And for me, I'm like, whoa. We're not talking about maybe you robbed a bank because you didn't have money or, being a child molester, statistics show that they have a huge likelihood of being repeat offenders.
Right.
So that being the case, there's just no basis whatsoever to think that this person is not going to do it again.
It's a spiritual issue. That's an incredibly odd argument for that. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Huh. So how far into your time with the Jehovah's Witnesses did you start to I think you actually might have already answered, but just to find out again, how you said you were with them for about 10 years. So at what point, how long were you a believer in it that you started to seriously start to question it?
Actually, I was a believer in it for all the way up until May of last year. I had like lingering doubts in the back of my head that I had always pushed aside. There were certain doctrinal things that I understood, but they didn't quite make sense. But I was like, okay, I can see that. So I wanted to really take the time to address those things. We had in 2016 a very powerful video that was shown at the convention, and it mentioned, the narrator mentioned, that there were people who had these doubts about Jesus. And so for me, I felt like in order to really be ready for this great tribulation and Armageddon. Let me dispel these doubts and strengthen my faith. And when I looked at those things more closely, they just didn't make sense. And then just looking at the Bible itself, without the Watchtower's interpretation, and then kind of going to what they said, and then I kind of looked at, well, what do other people think? And that's when the end began, because I realized that there were major, major flaws with some of these doctrinal issues.
How do you identify now religiously? Like, would you say you're an atheist, agnostic?
I'd say I'm agnostic and leaning toward atheism. It's really hard to believe, and it always was hard for me to believe. I used to say all the time, just like we are so sure that this is the one true religion, millions of other people feel that way about their religion. So you mean only because they didn't happen to be born in a place where, they had a better chance of being a Christian, that God's going to say, oh, well, you shouldn't be resurrected? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And now that I'm in this situation, I feel like if God exists, I spent all of this time in what I thought was service to him, and now to see like none of this is even real, it's hard for me to believe that there is a God.
I get that. And so I guess that I had another question earlier about, why you didn't just maybe go back to whether it's Baptist Christianity or just another type of Christianity. But I guess if you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses and they do base their teachings off of the Bible, even though it is, a one type of Bible or one translation of the Bible that is very unique to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Just in general, I guess it would be kind of difficult to say that you want to go to any sort of Christ-focused religion or any religion in general if you started questioning it as a whole.
Yeah, I really took the time to look into like the history of religion, and there's just immense borrowing that goes on. I did go with my dad to his church recently, and it was kind of like, just putting on a show. It was, I feel like once you're not indoctrinated and you allow yourself to just be open-minded, it's hard to go back, because you realize that religion has been and continues to be a tool that's used by people to control and manipulate other people. There are certainly, religious people who are trying to do wonderful, positive things in the world, absolutely. But by and large, I feel like you can be a moral person without religion.
Right, like you can know that it's wrong to steal from somebody based on the fact that you wouldn't want to get stolen from, and that's enough.
Yeah, and what I don't like about religion is that it's part of being human. So we all want to feel special at the end of the day, and we all want to feel like we have answers to the questions that we all ask as humans. We want to understand the world around us. So religion does offer that, but in addition to that, as it makes you feel special, my experience has been that many religions make you feel special because you're not like other people. And I'm not really interested at this point in anything that is divisive, because I feel like we're all humans and we have way more in common than we have differences.
Yeah, and that's been scientifically proven, if I'm not mistaken. It's like the differences between us that we kind of impose, like just if you take race, for example. I mean, it's like there are differences, depending on countries where people are from and things like that. But for the most part, it's like I can't remember the exact number, but it's like we're 98% similar or something.
Yeah. So it's kind of, and that's the other thing with the witnesses, is that they refer to their organization as being in a spiritual paradise. And so slowly but surely, I'm finding that so many things I thought could only be found in that organization can be found throughout humanity, So there's a lot of, different groups of people who aren't, racially biased, and who are, so just that whole idea that everything is so different with them. And it's like, no, there's other people who feel that way.
Right. It's like the fact that you're not a Jehovah's Witness doesn't mean that you're a racist.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your ex-fiance, on behalf of all men, I apologize for the crazy ones of us. Was he quote unquote crazy because of something that he was doing religiously, or was that something unrelated to the Jehovah's Witnesses?
I really, in hindsight, I think that there were already some serious insecurity issues that existed, and I think that the Jehovah's Witness organization, whatever problems you have, I feel like it just magnifies them. Basically, the misogyny, he had hid it very well, and it came out in full force right before our wedding. I actually really hope that someone I know is listening to this, because if they are, then they're already on their way out, so that's exciting. But also, like, anyone who knows me, even with my voice change and my fake name, they would know exactly who I am from the story, which I'm fine with. So basically, long story short, we had some inappropriate, quote unquote, inappropriate things that happened. Which, I laugh at it now because it's like, this person's about to be my husband in 30 days. Like, this is ridiculous, but whatever. So that had happened several months before. We had been on reproof, which means that they take away your privileges. So he wasn't allowed to be on the stage or handle mics anymore for 3 months. Usually you're not allowed to give comments at the meeting, but they allowed us to continue giving comments because it was a private reproof, meaning that no one's going to know about it. They're not going to announce it. Of course, people figured it out because the elders continued to put us in positions that we couldn't be in. So, for example, standing by the cart is supposedly a privilege. They would have us signed up for that, knowing that we couldn't do that. So eventually people figured it out. Once we were off of reproof and that was over, rather than, just talking about, hey, have you guys done this again and blah, 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 the conversation was about us sitting next to each other. We had started sitting next to each other in the Kingdom Hall, and we were told that we were not allowed to sit next to each other. We knew that we were going to get engaged, within the next few months, but we were told that it sets a bad example for others. I mean, I was extremely upset. I was in tears, and they spoke to us separately and told us both the same thing. My fiance even asked, what is the biblical reason? And of course they didn't have one. And they just said, we want to just know, are you going to do what we're asking? Are you going to be obedient? So all of that happened. Fast forward a few months later, we're closer to the wedding. We're in good standing. Everything's cool. And my fiance, so I suffer with depression. Mm-hmm. And it's mild, it's under control. My fiance knew this going in. I never lied to him about anything. So any problems I had, he was fully aware long before proposing. So I had a separating call, which is when the elders come and they're supposed to help you from the Bible. And he also came as well. I was extremely depressed and talked to them or whatever. Fast forward about a week or two later, he and I are disagreeing about something via text, and he says to me that I need to read the Bible more to understand God's will. And so because I had just, I just went through this whole shepherding call, I was really depressed and feeling like I'm not good enough because, fear, obligation, and guilt is what cults do, and it was really effective on me because of my just natural personality. And so I responded to him, and we had a back and forth. And this was all via text. And from that, he said that he was seriously questioning whether or not we could get married. He didn't talk to me for several days, and he went to the elders and wouldn't respond to me at all. So then I go to the elders, can you tell me what's going on? He just told me to talk to you. I don't know what's happening here. I've tried to resolve it with him. And long story short, eventually the elders talked to both of us. They had told him, try this, try that. He didn't listen to anything they said. They eventually sat down with both of us, and he said that I was not submissive. It sounds, every time I've said this story, I laugh because it sounds so ridiculous. It sounds like I'm making it up, but it actually happened. It's so bizarre. But he said that I'm not submissive because he had told me before not to do something, and then I said it again. I said it was a joke. It was a joke that I had said to him he didn't like. And so just off of that, he was upset. And the elders told him, like, this is not how you're supposed to treat your wife. They made it very clear. And he went back and forth with them for an hour and a half. And I just sat there in silence. Eventually, he had tears in his eyes. He realized that he was looking like a complete idiot. And he, tried to apologize. When he and I spoke, and elders told him, one of the elders told him after, like, you need to apologize to her. You need to call her and make this right. So when we spoke again in person, he said, that he shouldn't have made the decision. He wanted to postpone the wedding. He didn't have another date. It was just postponing it until he felt comfortable. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wait, what? 30 days before our wedding? Like, we're supposed to get our marriage license next week. What do you mean? So, after speaking to the elders and everything, he realized that that was wrong and that he shouldn't have made the decision to postpone it by himself. And so I wanted to talk about all the things that he had said to the elders and all these accusations. And I mean, he had brought up arguments we had and resolved months prior. So I was like, we need to talk about that stuff. And he said, we don't need to talk about it. We talk to the elders. So for him, it's like, we talk to the elders, we're going to get married. And I'm like, wait, hold on. That doesn't make sense. I'm not marrying the elders. I'm marrying you.
Right.
We have to talk about, like, it was really bizarre. While he wasn't talking to me, he decided to talk to my mom, and I sat there, and he ignored me, and he told my mom, she's this, she's that, and it was so bizarre. It was so bad. So for me, it was like, there's no way I can marry this person, and I see how you treated me, and you dragged my name through the mud, and we're not going to talk about that. So that was the end of that, and here we are. But now that I'm awake, looking back, oh man, just the level of misogyny, having the elders asking those inappropriate questions. The elders told us to both write each other a letter just saying how we felt. And I, like an idiot, I went and did that because I was very obedient. I had to give him a copy and give the elders a copy. At the time, it didn't occur to me, and he never wrote the letter. He never did what they told him to do, but I did. And perhaps, now that I know more, I know now that when you go to another congregation, there's a letter about you that is sent. It's a letter of introduction. And I know that letter that I wrote was probably put in my file, because why would the elders need a copy of a letter written to my fiance? So just that, like, now I look back, like, that's crazy. That's a cult. Like, I'm about to marry this person. Why do I need to give you a letter that I'm addressing to him? But at the time, I didn't see it.
Did you call off the wedding, or was it like that you left after that and then you both just decided that
I called off the wedding because I gave him the ring back because he just felt like, whatever, we talked to the elders, and it's like, wait, what do you mean? So I gave him the ring back, and then from there, I kind of second thoughts. I wanted to still talk about it, and he wasn't interested in talking about it at all. And then some of the elders, actually, I spoke to them about it, and one in particular who was supposed to be giving our wedding talk, he called me and basically tried to use guilt again and tell me that I was wrong. Why did you give the ring back? And I'm like, if someone treated your daughter the way he treated me, you would tell her to still marry him? Mm-hmm. Really? That's what you would say? And of course, he couldn't say yes to that. And he kept saying, well, you're supposed to keep your commitments, and God takes marriage very seriously. And I said, I understand all of that. Why don't you talk to him? I gave him the ring back, but I've been trying to call him. I've been trying to talk to him. He refuses to talk to me. So looking back, it's very clear now that I was basically viewed as
property.
Yeah, I was the property, and I was wrong. Even though he had done all of these things and said all these things that were wrong, and even though the elders told him, like, you cannot treat her that way, you are wrong, once the dust settled, ultimately he was still had a great standing in the congregation. He's laughing and talking with people. I'm in tears. I couldn't even go to the meetings anymore. I had to change my congregation, and yeah, it was very, very traumatic. And having the elders involved made it 10 times worse.
Good for you for getting out of that. Honestly, well done. I kind of wish I had like a clapping soundtrack or something that I could play right now. I'm really glad you got out of that. Damn, though. I mean, that's terrible. And I mean, you don't have to go into anything that makes you uncomfortable, but I mean, when you're talking about somebody being submissive, I mean, there are two things that come to mind. First of all, I think about like either being sexually submissive, or I think about like you know, you said that like he asked you to do something but like I think that like men could want a woman who's submissive, and they think about like sort of the typical Stepford wives, you know, cleaning and doing the dishes, that kind of thing, and that could be seen as having a submissive woman. What would you mind elaborating exactly what he wanted you to do that like you weren't, or that he saw as not being submissive?
Well, that's the thing. There was nothing. This whole submission thing just came out of nowhere. It really stemmed from that argument, and he felt like because he had said something to me from the Bible that I should not have had a response. I should not have defended myself. But definitely another thing that came up, you know, around this whole time, you know, after he basically acted like an idiot and went to the elders and then started ignoring me, when we did talk again, he asked me out of nowhere, like, would you be willing to not work if your husband didn't want you to work? And I'm like, yeah, sign me up yesterday. Like, who wants to work? But it's weird because when we got engaged, we had, like, literally the next week, we, like, met up, and I, like, made a budget, and so we had all of those kinds of conversations. So it became clear to me that, like, he is insecure about the fact that I make more money than him. Yeah, it was very odd, because it's like, why are we even talking about this? Like, this, it was weird, and he felt like, he said it, you know, that after that argument, oh, you know, you're not submissive, and he wanted to postpone until he felt comfortable knowing that I would be submissive. All of this from one argument. It wasn't like an ongoing issue. It was very bizarre. I should also mention that I am not his first fiance. I'm number 3.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, that all sounds like pure telltale signs of insecurity. I mean, if it's like, yeah, like if you make more money than him, then he's got like a power complex. That's what that is.
Right. And he was going to be moving into my place. So, I mean, I was very, like, I was submissive. Every time he came over, I would make him whatever he wanted to eat, and you know, I would serve him his food, and I was very much like, this is going to be our place, not my place. So really it came down to, I think he's just one of those people that loves the idea of marriage but can't handle the reality. Because anyone who is 37 years old and you're running to go tell on your wife, something's wrong. You know, you're in an adult relationship. You should be able to resolve it with the other member of the relationship. And it wasn't like, hey, I need help with this. He literally went to the elders and told on me and accused me of all of these things without ever trying to talk to me about the argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was that? You said that it was traumatic that happened. I mean, did that affect your faith at the time? You said that you had to switch to a different congregation, but did that make you, did that like sort of like send you further into believing just because you like needed it more then, or did that start making you question it more?
I think that seeing the lack of support in my congregation really was a bit of an eye-opener, but I think I was just so focused on trying to get through it, and I really was trying to rely on Jehovah at that time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that it really had any effect on my faith at that time.
Okay.
But definitely looking back, it helped me to wake up, because it was when I had taken a trip by myself. You know, I was starting to begin to move past this. Some time had passed, and it was the first time like I was kind of coming out of this depression from dealing with all of this stuff. And that was the same trip where I started to look into my doubts. I think I had just gained a sense of like strength in being able to deal with it. Because I mean, you know, the ending of a relationship for it to end in the way that it did, and at the time that it did, it was extremely traumatic. I had just started a new job, so it was. I just kept saying like, how do people still go to work and deal with this? Like I'm crying on the way to work. I'm crying on the way. It was really bad. So I think getting through that gave me a sense of strength and helped me to feel like, okay, I can look into these doubts and everything's going to be fine, because Jehovah helped me to get through this situation. And yeah, it didn't quite work out that way.
So, I can't remember if you mentioned it earlier, but are you in a field of work that's science related?
No, I do have a degree in psychology, but I'm in education.
Okay, so that's where you were mentioning about psychology. So it sounds like either way, you know, you've studied something that's science related, and especially when you're studying the science of the mind, you know, you kind of develop that type of personality. Like I was actually raised by a psychologist, so you know, I'm either really fucked up or I'm doing okay. Like it's one or the other. But the point is that you are when you sort of have that like that scientific type of mind. I picture that it wouldn't just be enough that you disagree with it to make you stop believing it. Like I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but like if you have that type of mentality, you would maybe need a little bit more than just not wanting to follow it to say that you don't find it to be actually true.
Yeah, I think that, well, the biggest thing that was the Jeffrey Jackson thing, for him to say something that was completely the opposite of what they have printed and preached for, I mean, pretty much since the beginning, that really made me question. But as I started to look at the doctrine more, that's what made me see it's not true. And I think the last straw was I haven't really done a lot of research into the Bible, but I remember when I was like 10 or maybe a little older, I had learned about Hammurabi's code. And I remember, you know, the whole eye for an eye thing is also in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wait, but Hammurabi's code came out before. That was before the Bible. So how did that end up here? And so there were certain things that were like, this doesn't quite make sense. So after this whole process, I've been able to look at the Bible a little bit more objectively. And I see that it's riddled with like major flaws. And so at this point, I think that's helped me to not really be a believer, because there are people who are out of the religion, but they're still mentally indoctrinated.
I thought about that a lot too when I was younger. When I started to question. I mean, I fully renounced. I want to say like maybe 6 years ago or something like that. Just because it was like, for me, it was an interesting process. Like in high school, I had a lot going on in high school, and you know, it was a evangelical school, so it's like I was kind of I didn't talk to anybody about the fact that I was questioning my faith at the time, but you know, I got through it. I was just working and didn't really focus that much on school, and you know, got through it, and everything was fine. And then, you know, for I'd say about like 10 years, a little less than 10 years, I didn't really think about it a whole lot. I just lived my life. And then, you know, I got to a point in my life where I kind of wanted to figure out what I believed. And then I realized that there was nothing that I had questioned for 10 years that I ended up believing in. And I didn't know why I was putting God on this pedestal as this thing that, you know, not believing and not doing anything religious in that time didn't affect my life at all. So it's just like, you know what, I don't think I believe it. But I remember that a big thing for me was that I would learn about other religions, and I would learn that there are billions of people that don't believe in Christianity, and it felt narcissistic to say that Christianity is correct and everybody else is wrong. It didn't seem accurate. So I get what you're saying, how it's like, you know, you learn that there are all these other people that got it, that like they believe they're right just as much as I believe I'm right. So what is the actual chance that I am in fact right? And it nothing from there was the same, because it was like just kind of like a logical question I couldn't answer. And nobody else really had the answer either, including the Bible. And again, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I couldn't find anything that helped.
Yeah, and that's something that was always in my head, is like, especially within the last few years, looking at how they always talk about the numbers and how, there's so many witnesses. And so while I was still very much indoctrinated, I remember like doing a comparison. I could be wrong, but I think it's like 1%, maybe less, or 0.1%, one of those are Jehovah's Witnesses. There's like 8 billion of them, but there's 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses, but there's like 8 billion people. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you're saying that we're right, but it's such a small amount of people. I just would always think to myself, like, I can't believe that of all the people that I'm one of the people that God saw, like, hey, I want you to come into this organization. Like, so many people don't know the truth, and I'm one of the few. It always amazed me, and I couldn't understand it. And now I realize it's because it's not real.
You talked briefly about the transfusion thing with blood transfusions. I came to a conclusion with the last interview that I did, because she brought it up as well. It's one thing if it's like an adult who says, I don't want to get transfusion. To me, that can be kind of like getting a DNR. Like, you don't want to be resuscitated. Like, all right, you're an adult, you have the right to do with your body as you please. But I think where I have the issue with it is when they do that to children.
Yes, I definitely feel very much the same way. And as I was starting to wake up, that was one of the things that I had studied, and I made a decision that if I had kids, I would not refuse them blood, because witnesses say that they don't practice child baptism, which is a lie. They don't baptize babies, but if you're 9, you can certainly get baptized. But, if I have a child who hasn't yet really learned about this religion enough to make that decision, then how can I put my religious views on them to an extent that they're going to die? That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. And it's from what I understand, also it's like it's almost like the people that do die because they refuse transfusions. They're kind of elevated a little bit by the witness community.
Yes, actually, they are downright martyrs. There was a magazine, a Watchtower magazine in, I believe, the 80s or early 90s, that had the faces of several children that had died because they didn't take blood transfusions. And they're always like credited as these wonderful examples. I even had a family member who lost a friend because that friend refused blood transfusions. But what most witnesses don't know is how many times they've changed the doctrine on blood transfusions. It has flip-flopped multiple times over the years. So when you're dealing with someone's life, and I think that's really the crux of the issue, my issue with Jehovah's Witnesses, is that there's so much about it that people don't know. So taking blood is actually a disfellowshipping offense. If you unrepentantly accept blood, you can be disfellowshipped for that.
Right. And
it's like I chose to continue to live my life so that I could continue to serve God. That's why I took the blood. Nope, that doesn't matter. But, a lot of witnesses, they don't even know that that's something you can be disfellowshipped for. So there's just so many half-truths and misrepresentations, and that's also part of what Steve Hassan mentions in his book about cults, is that you have the rank and file members who are they're the least knowledgeable about what goes on behind the curtain. So the average Jehovah's Witness doesn't know what an elder knows. And it's very sad.
Now, to play the devil's advocate, are there people that are Jehovah's Witnesses that are kind of like reformers who do say that it's okay to get a blood transfusion, who do stand up against the child molestations and things like that?
There is there are some people in the XGW community, you call them physically in, mentally out.
Okay.
So there are some people who that's actually how we got a lot of letters that they send to elders, or even videos from Bethel. So there are even people in the headquarters who are awake, but, you know, for various reasons, they can't say it publicly. So even when someone kind of wants to be a reformer, it has to be done very covertly.
So it's almost like a conspiracy. It's like...
No, it really is. Literally, if I were to openly talk with people at the Kingdom Hall about the things that I've learned and my concerns, I could be kicked out for apostasy. And if you say that to most witnesses, I've said it to my family, and they're like, no, that's not true. But I know it's true because some people have secretly recorded their meetings with elders. And so I've actually seen this happen. And in the elders handbook, it also says that if someone is, you know, spreading these divisive ideas, they can be disfellowshipped for apostasy. Mm-hmm. So me simply saying, hey, this policy isn't right, or this doctrine doesn't make sense to me, I can't do that.
So I guess it's like there might be some believers who hold whatever beliefs they have, but as far as the people that are higher up in the church, like you can definitely find Catholic priests that will openly denounce, you know, what has happened as far as the child molestations go. But seems like, you know, there are fewer of them in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like they have to be kept quiet, or they will lose their standing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. If you speak out, then you can be kicked out, lose your family, lose your friends. So witnesses, you know, they can, if someone brings it up, they can publicly say, you know, oh yeah, we hate child abuse, it's bad, but you can never say anything that is critical of the organization or even the elders in your local congregation. We're regularly told to obey them, listen, obey, and be blessed is what they like to say all the time. They even have a song called that. And you're just encouraged to just constantly just listen and obey and follow, and never publicly speak out against anything.
Right. You said that you struggled with depression a bit, and that's kind of come to it came to a head at one point when you know you had suicidal thoughts, you know, when you were leaving or questioning leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, how are you doing now?
I'm doing much better. I was seeing a therapist, and I just found a new one who specializes in cult survivors. So that's been really, really helpful. I also found a XJW meetup group and made some new friends. And so I'm definitely struggling. It's still really, really difficult because I know that there's going to come a time when my family will shun me. I already know that, like, when I get married, it's not going to be to a witness. And, you know, whenever that happens, I know that none of my family is going to come to my wedding. So there's still a lot of emotional turmoil. But I feel much better than I did before, because now I have that validation to know that, like, it's not just me. I'm not crazy. Like, all of the things that I'm feeling, other people have felt and are going through.
Do you associate your depression with, I mean, you know, it's largely chemical. I know that, so I'm not trying to diminish that. But do you associate it with your experience in religion as a whole, or do you think that that's just sort of kind of like what happened with your ex-fiance? How it's like there were problems, but they were magnified.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, I definitely had mild depression. You know, it was never like I couldn't function, but the religion definitely magnified it because the fear, obligation, and guilt is constantly promoted. And in addition to that, even with, like, waking up, I really had so much depression and anxiety because I had all of these thoughts and ideas that I was previously not allowed to have. Mm-hmm. So, you know, now I do battle with depression. I have, like, seasonal depression, so it's worse at this time of year. But absolutely, like, 98% of my stress at this point of my life is dealing with the consequences of leaving this religion. So it definitely makes things much worse for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. So, I mean, when I first went to this Christian high school, it was like, so I had been sort of always taught about hell when I was younger. You know, it was just there. You know, you didn't focus on it. It was just there. You know, they really didn't want to even bring it up that much. They were like, you know, just be good to each other. That's all there is to it. So I got to give, you know, Quakerism credit for that. But as soon as I went to this Christian high school, I think like the first or second day that I was there, they like at the end of one of the we were just having lunch. At the end of lunch, the principal came in and, you know, got everybody quiet, and he started talking about how there was somebody who like wrote something on a bathroom wall, and, you know, it was like, you know, 15-year-olds. Who knows what it was? It's probably something stupid. Actually younger than that, like 13 or 14. So he brought it up to everybody at that lunch. And he brought it up that this was non-Christian behavior, and this is the behavior of somebody who would end up going to hell. And I thought that this was hysterical. I laughed, but not like really loud. I didn't get in trouble for laughing or anything like that. But I looked around expecting that I wasn't going to be the only one. I was expecting that, you know, this was a school full of people who like me didn't really believe it, but, you know, they were going to a religious school, but everybody was like dead silent. They were like, oh yeah, I don't want to go to hell. I'm not gonna write on the bathroom wall anymore. So like, yeah, when I started to question my faith, it was you know, it wasn't just that I was wondering if this was okay. I was also wondering if I was going to be going to hell. You know, I've never been diagnosed with depression, but I know myself, like I have depressive tendencies. And there's nothing, there's been nothing in my life that's made me more depressed than when I was questioning it and felt alone and felt like if I got hit by a car at that moment when I was questioning it and I wasn't praying to Jesus, you know, that I was gonna die and I was gonna go to hell.
Yeah. I constantly, when I had that shepherding call, it was really about me not feeling good enough. Mm-hmm. I constantly felt like, you know, I can't pioneer, and I wish that I could. And, you know, technically I had the hours, you know, I could have, but I mean, I commute for work. It would have been extremely difficult and stressful, but we're constantly being told that you should be trying to, you know, do more. If you can't pioneer, try to still put in more hours.
Right.
And then even just in interactions with people in the hall, we're supposed to all be not just friendly, but we're supposed to be friends. So even though I can't stand this person or she can't stand me, other than just, you know, being cordial hello, there's an expectation that we have to really put forth this effort. I mean, just the amount of control over your life, even the things that I would watch. I've started watching so many shows that I was not allowed to watch before because they were considered bad. So just having that freedom that I can make choices for myself has been really, really helpful and healing. And definitely just constantly having that micromanaging influence and always feeling just, that's my biggest issue with religion. This idea that I am inherently not enough and that I need to look outside of myself for some type of salvation. I just feel like that's not really helpful or productive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of diminishes your own self-esteem. Like it makes you invaluable without it. Which again, I mean, I don't know. Like that doesn't. From what I was raised to believe about Jesus, and again, I mean, I feel sort of odd, like, you know, promoting some of the things that Jesus said when it's like I don't believe it anymore. But like from what I was raised about what Jesus taught, I mean that never seemed accurate to me. That it's like that you are nothing. You know, your life is better with Jesus maybe, but it didn't seem like you were nothing without it.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And that's the thing with the witnesses is that it's all or nothing. There is no gray area. And when I came into the religion, that was my mindset. Thanks to lots of therapy, I no longer feel that way. And I realize that most of life is in the gray area. But with witnesses, it's black or white, all or nothing, and that's it.
I'm really glad you're doing better. I really am. That's really good to hear. Did you do any of the door-to-door things that are, sort of prototypically associated with Jehovah's Witnesses?
Oh, yes. Did I? So I occasionally would be an auxiliary pioneer. That's when you put in 50 hours a month. Whenever my schedule allowed, I would either go out more in the ministry, or I would feel really guilty for not wanting to. I also, I was in a foreign language congregation. I even went to another country several times to preach there. So I was very, very active in the ministry.
Which country?
I went, well, whatever. People are going to figure it out. It's me. Hi, everyone. To Haiti. I'm like, if I leave that out, maybe they won't know. Whatever. At this point, like, who cares? My name's Angela, so we're going to just stick with that. So I was in a Haitian Creole congregation, and I went to Haiti. I even had a relative that moved there to do this kind of work. And so I visited her like 3 times in a year. Prior to that, I had visited other countries to visit other family members. I spent some time in DR. I spent like a month or 2 in Mexico. I went to Puerto Rico. I love to travel, and I felt like, hey, let me just combine those two. So when I would have breaks from work, I would use that time to travel to other countries when I could.
Did you learn Haitian Creole to go to Haiti?
I did. I'm actually fluent in Haitian Creole, which doesn't really help me as much now. But I learned as I was able to have Bible studies, and it was very rewarding at the time. But that was another thing. So I was already awake at this point in June, this past June of 2018. I was awake for like a month or 2, and I had already planned to go with my mom back to Haiti to visit my relative who had moved there. This would be my 3rd time going. Mm-hmm. I loved it so much. We made these plans, and so at this point, it's like I can't just suddenly pull out. That's going to look crazy. I can't say like, hey guys, I don't believe this anymore. So I went on the trip, which was, that was a real mind fuck. But I went on the trip, and I remember both me and my mom just remarking at like the intense poverty. And I told her, when we leave the airport, just remember, like when we get out of this airport, it's not going to be like what you're seeing in the airport. Because the airport, was different. And my mom had never been to a 3rd world country. So for her, she was, commenting on things. And I don't understand that. This doesn't make sense. And I said, well, just wait, it's going to be different. And I mean, literally her mouth dropped open as we're riding, up the mountain, because they don't have infrastructure. So there's literally garbage just on the side of the road. You just burn the garbage. That's how you get rid of it.
Right.
And she just could not believe it. And so there were a few times when I said to her, all the money that the organization has, I wish that they could like build a well or something. Because we'd be out in service and seeing little, 7-year-old, 8-year-old kids, these huge jugs of water that I couldn't carry as an adult. They had to go down to the river to get water. And yet we're going to them with a tract about the Bible. Something about that just didn't make sense. But I kept telling myself, this is going to be something that lasts even longer than, food would, because it's going to give them everlasting life. But when I went on that 3rd trip, and I was awake at the time, I saw that, like, this whole ministry thing is a complete waste of time. Like, I can't see someone hungry and say, well, I know you need bread, but I'm going to give you a Bible instead. Like,
right. Yeah. Well, at least you got to learn another language for it. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that worked out. And I think that, it served its purpose for a period of time in my life when it did match who I was at that time as far as being black or white.
Yeah.
But I really, initially I thought that there was some redemption in it, but really I realized, like, I have all of these really wonderful qualities, and those were there before I became a Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I had a bit of a temper, and becoming a witness, I had to work on that. So that's something that's a lot better now. I don't really have a temper. I'm actually, like, so non-confrontational. It's kind of a problem sometimes. So, you know, that was a good thing that came out of it, that and the language.
Yeah. So was there anything else that you wanted to say? Anything that I didn't get a chance to ask about, that you still wanted to be able to say to Jehovah's Witnesses, to people that are questioning any religion, to you know, just anything that you wanted to be able to say that I didn't ask about?
Two things. One, if you have somehow figured out that it's me, please contact me. I changed my phone number, but track me down. Because if you're listening to this, just that alone, that says to me that there is a huge, that you're questioning things, which is good. And the other thing is, it's such a cliche. You know, people say it gets better with time, and that's true. But also that there is a huge community. After the Leah Remini special, the Ex-Jehovah community got way bigger. And so thanks to the internet, there's a lot of resources where you can find information that's not even from so-called apostate websites. You know, there's so many court documents and even old publications that are now up there. But just take the time to do your research and just trust that there are other people in your same boat, and that, you know, there's a community out there and we are here to support you.
Special thanks to Angela for being so open and for having so much information immediately available. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for the weekly episode with me and Faye. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a written review with 5 stars. The written reviews help to move the show up the charts. For immediate updates and discussions, follow the show on Twitter @OutFoldPodcast. I started a Patreon and GoFundMe, located at Patreon and GoFundMe.com/OutOfTheFold, because I want to be able to dedicate more time to a new approach I'm trying to take with the show. If you're listening right now, I'm not asking you to donate. Rather, just keep doing what you're doing and share the show with someone you trust. Logo and artwork by my wife. Production by my wife and I. All music by me. See you on the internet. This has been Out of the Fold.